Okay, so now that I finally beat Elden Ring, a 65-hour journey from start to finish that I thoroughly enjoyed with so much left to do. But with that being said, I have something to say about the boss fights within this game. Elden Ring's bosses are not good. Okay, listen, hear me out. I love this game just as much as the next Souls fan, but seeing this game get infinite praise from everyone on YouTube, save for Donkey, is just getting exhausting. I know most YouTubers just want to say what the status quo is so they can rake in all the views and likes, but I feel like this absolutely needs to be said. I was a little worried after fighting Radahn about how the bosses were about to scale up from there, because as you guys know, I was not a huge fan of that boss fight. Clearly, Radahn was the start of a trend within this game where the bosses just become these ridiculously aggressive powerhouses that can one-shot the shit out of you anytime, anywhere. To the point where your deaths don't feel like they occur as a result of your fault as the player, but rather your death was caused because of a boss mechanic that you don't feel readily equipped to handle with the tools at your disposal. I'm gonna explain what I mean by this in a bit, but that statement is not true for every boss within Elden Ring. I really only think this begins to apply with the bosses you encounter towards the end, although you can start to see this problem sort of creep up in the early game. For example, let's use one of my level 1 boss fights against, say, Godric as an example. In order to perfectly execute against that boss, I had to wait for him to make the first move, dodge his attacks accordingly, then go and get in a few attacks of my own before backing off entirely. His aggressiveness greatly outweighs my own, so you have to adopt a defensive strategy in order to be able to get through the fight cleanly. But notice how I'm never the one to attack him first, because it would simply work against me if I did. Now, I'm not saying there's a problem here necessarily, it's just a different style of play compared to previous games where there were times where you were allowed to strike first before a boss if you timed your attack properly. This is true of all the bosses in the early game no matter what level you're at. I'm just using my level 1 run as an exaggerated example here. You must adopt a passive playstyle with an Elden Ring because the boss's attack animations are that much faster than yours and they're just that much more aggressive than you. The best thing I can compare this to is it's like playing Bloodborne, but your dodge is the fat roll animation from Dark Souls. That's what it feels like against the bosses a majority of the time. But after beating Morgott, I began to see this problem get way out of hand. Let's just take a look at the Fire Giant, for example. One of the first big endgame bosses you take on, and already I'm thinking, Fire Giant? That's a pretty generic name for an endgame boss, but whatever. His design is pretty badass, the music, I gotta say, is also straight up badass, and being faced with this colossus while you ride up on Torrent makes for what you think is about to be a pretty cool fight. But then you actually fight the guy and it's like, oh my god, this is not as fun as I thought it was gonna be. Firstly, his attacks cover such a wide range of the arena that being on Torrent can be a bit rough on the approach. He'll use this shockwave attack that is really tough to properly time as you have to double jump over it, or he'll come and slam you on the head with his big ass shield. It doesn't make for a very good time, but that's just the beginning. The best way to damage this boss is to run under him with Torrent and then begin attacking one of his legs until his second phase. Now the key here with his first form is to stay under him and near his legs as long as possible. Thing is, he's got a few tools to flush you out, like his Firestorm spell, or these fire orbs that have endless tracking that explode whenever they get near you. If you're not careful, he can easily combo you into instant death, since being on Torrent during this boss is practically a death wish due to the stun lock you get put into when you lose Torrent. Now, the problem here is, you absolutely need Torrent during the fight, otherwise you're going to get absolutely creamed on. Literally, if you can't use Torrent during the battle, you might as well give up. So the only solution here is pretty much don't ever get hit, which can be a bit hard to manage because of the absolute struggle the camera is during this boss. Because you want to aim to be under him during the fight, it's hard to capture the Free Giant within your camera so that you can see his attack animations and what he's doing. And you definitely don't want to be locked onto him because you want to be able to hit his leg. This results in some absolutely bullshit moments where you can be hit by an attack you didn't see coming, simply because he's too big for the camera to accommodate. That's not even to mention his wonky hitboxes. Half the time I feel like I was nowhere near an attack, yet the game would be like, nope, you got hit. Still though, once you warm up to his first phase, it isn't all that bad. The reason I'm even making this video though is because of his second phase. Oh my god. When he rips off that second leg of his, this dude means business. He is not happy that you made him a one-legged giant, and he is about to let you know it. Remember what I said about needing to stay under him in order to not get hit by anything? Yeah, he does not allow that strategy in his second form. Wanna know why? Because he gets on his hands and knees. No, I'm not kidding. That's literally his second phase. Genius, right? It's like From thought, how do we keep them from getting under the boss? Oh, just put him on his hands and knees. Perfect. Problem solved. So now his weak point in the second phase are his hands and chest. You've got to face him head on and be the one to attack first in order to deal any damage. Remember when I said being offensive is a problem in this game? Yeah, with this boss, the game forces your hand. So now you have to somehow deal with the fire orbs that track you endlessly that explode on contact. Oh, and this attack where he erupts like a volcano. Oh, and this attack where he rolls across the entire map whenever you try and get near him. And you have to deal with all that, all while dealing with the absolute atrocity that is the camera during this fight. Who in their right mind thought this was a good idea? No, I want to know. The rolling attack that I just mentioned, though, is by far the worst offender. Yeah, all the other attacks can be pretty annoying, especially when you can't actually see the fire orbs coming at you because you're too busy trying to keep the fire giant in focus when he's rolling around, but they're nothing compared to the rolling attack itself. Here's the issue. Every time you get close enough to damage this guy, he will roll away from you so incredibly fast and cover such a huge distance, requiring you to try and get closer to him once more, all while dodging his non-stop attacks and just rinse and repeat. Problem is, he doesn't follow the same rules as you do. Yeah, see that tree over there that you would normally get stuck on if you ran into it? He rolls right over it. Or that rocky cliff you would normally need to jump around to get on top of? Nope, he just flops around until he gets to the top. This is called a game imbalance. You have to play by the game's rules, but the boss straight up doesn't. I get that he's a giant, so he's supposed to be able to have this sense of scale versus the player, but it just doesn't make for a fun boss fight, and in a video game, I'll take fun instead of unfair any day. So it ends up being this constant chase sequence that never ends because of the amount of health this guy has. This guy is one chunky monkey. You will be dealing pixels of damage to Fire Giant, and I have no idea why From decided to give this guy so much health. I had my halberd upgraded to plus 17 at 55 strength, and I was still doing little to no damage on every hit. The fact that when I search up Fire Giant and one of the first things I see is an exploit on how to cheese this boss tells me everything I need to know. No one actually wants to fight this guy because he's an awful boss. Yet everyone wants to praise Elden Ring like it's the next best thing since sliced bread, all while ignoring some pretty glaring flaws within its boss design. Let's take a look at an equally aggressive boss from one of From's other games, say the Ape from Sekiro. This boss is up in your face, flailing his arms around, chucking poop at you, and in some ways is more aggressive than the Fire Giant in Elden Ring, just because of how agile and quick he is for being such a huge opponent. But the difference between Sekiro and Elden Ring are the tools that Sekiro gives you to handle the ape with ease, even with how aggressive he is. You can set him on fire in order to deal more damage. You can parry every single one of his attacks, so even if they're coming at you quickly, as long as you react properly, you won't take a single lick of damage. And the fight becomes extremely satisfying because the boss feels completely fair within the confines of the game's mechanics. And not only that, with Sekiro's posture system, simply by playing defensively, you were playing offensively at the same time. You could not throw a single attack at bosses within that game and still kill them if you were good at parrying. Now put this exact same ape battle in Elden Ring and you have some bullshit on your hands. Because the tools you have to use in Elden Ring are not nearly as versatile as Sekiro's. The point I want to make sure I get across here though is that I'm not saying Fire Giant is a hard boss. I'm saying that he's an unfair and unfun one. You want to know how I beat him? I circled around his legs during his second phase and whittled down his health painstakingly hit by hit until he finally died. Yeah, remember how I said his weak points were his hands and chest? It was a lot more reliable to completely ignore how the game wants you to do it and cheese him in the stupidest way possible. You won't get hit by a lot of his attacks if you're directly behind him. The only thing you gotta watch out for are his rolls and his fire orbs, and even then he can still kill you in some bullshit manner. Now some of you are going to be like, see dude, you just changed your strategy and you beat him easy peasy, just get good, duh. But no, what I did was I cheated the game and did the boss the only way I thought I could reliably beat him because of the boss's terrible design. Listen, I'm just giving my opinion on what I think was a terrible boss and why I think the late game bosses are fairly awful, and if that's a crime, then the Elden police need to come arrest me right here, right now, okay? I also want to talk about how lazy some of the other bosses within the Mountain of Giants area and beyond feel in comparison to the bosses you encounter earlier within the game. Think of the minor Erdtree boss. Pretty cool the first time around, right? They throw them around different areas near minor Erdtrees and the fights are mostly the same every time. They can be tough the first time you encounter them, but the more you fight them, the better you get at dispatching them. But then you get to the Mountain of Giants area, and there you are fighting the Erdtree avatar for what feels like the 10th time, easily dispatching it until about half health and then… Oh, what the hell? Wait a minute, now you're making me fight two of them at the same time? And then the fight just gets utterly obnoxious, with each of them flailing their staffs about, summoning light magic. It just makes timing your dodges utterly stupid to the point where the strategy ends up getting one Erdtree avatar stuck behind the other so that you have time to get your attacks in. Now this isn't the first time From has done a 2-on-1 boss fight. Anyone remember Ornstein and Smo? What makes that fight any different from the Erdtree avatars? Well, for one, they had completely different designs. One was a bungling fat-ass hammer user whose attacks were incredibly slow and predictable, while the other was an agile, spear-wielding badass that felt a lot more dangerous than Smo. They complemented each other well, and you could strategize as taking one down before the other affected the second phase of their fight. The Erdtree avatars don't have the same complexity. They're literally just carbon copies attacking you at the same time with the exact same moveset, and that don't give you any breathing room, where with Ornstein and Smo there was an offset because one would chase you down while the other was super slow, giving you time to get attacks of your own in. The same goes for the Godskin duo. You fight each of them respectively one-on-one, and they're cool fights, before the game ends up deciding it'd be cool to have you fight both at the same time, even though they were designed to be fought one-on-one. But that's not even the worst part of it all. As soon as you're able to kill one of them, then they'll just eventually respawn. So there's not even a real strategy for going after one versus the other like with Ornstein and Smo, because the fight literally does not change throughout the entire fight. There's no second phase here. It's literally just kill one, fight the other one until one respawns, and then rinse and repeat. You know what this is? Fucking lazy. Let's call it like it is. This is straight up lazy boss design. Take this garbage fight out of the game and it'd make Elden Ring 10 times better for it. I'm not at all saying Elden Ring is bad because of one or two bad bosses, but the problem here is that it's not just one or two. It's Radahn, it's the Fire Giant, it's Melania, it's the Elden Beast. All of these bosses have glaring problems within their designs, and it's almost like people refuse to acknowledge them. Let's talk about the Elden Beast. Fighting the Elden Beast feels a lot like fighting the Fire Giant, except this time it's 10 times worse. You want to know why? Who at From Software thought that not being able to use Torrent during this fight was a good idea? What's the point of even having Torrent if you can't use him where it would be the most useful? I don't understand it. This dude can move across the map to get away from you just like the Fire Giant, and you don't get to close the distance as easily, because he has attacks that will have you running your ass off on foot like this one, or like this one, or the one where he has a million light rays coming at you while charging up his sword beams and it literally feels undodgeable. One of those attacks, okay, I can just run away, or I can just dodge. But both of them at the same time? I can't do both. I'm sorry guys, I'm just not that good. The only way I feel makes this boss more fair is if you have a summon along to at least distract the Elden Beast so that you're able to get some hits in, and that's not how these bosses should work. And Malekith? Don't even get me started. It's a common theme with a lot of these boss fights that their second phases just become absolute BS. Radagon? He is actually a fun fight. I don't have too many complaints. A final boss that actually feels like a final boss. I'm not gonna bitch about that. His attacks are telegraphed well, and overall it just feels badass when he's teleporting all over the place while you dodge every single attack. But that second phase just ruins it for me. Same goes for Malekith. The first phase is tolerable. But man, after that, the fight just becomes an absolute shit show with him flying all over the map, sending blade beams at you, and at least here everything feels dodgeable, but then the problem becomes, how am I supposed to deal damage when he's all over the map at all times? If he's not in the air sending blade beams at you, he slams his sword down on the ground toward you. And oh, you'd think that'd be an opportunity, right? Nope. His sword explodes soon after for massive damage, so you gotta watch out for that too. Oh, and if he hits you even once, your health will tick down constantly for an extended period of time if the boss fight didn't seem hard enough from just looking at it. Honestly, I think a huge part of the problem here is that these bosses do way too much damage. I had 60 vigor and it felt like it just wasn't enough. Even using Morgoth's Great Rune with the Great Arc, my health bar filled the entire screen and I was still getting shit on. Maybe toning down some of the damage with these late game bosses would make them feel a bit more fair? I don't know. It just feels like a lot of these late game bosses feel like they're just hard for the sake of being hard with no other redeeming qualities about them. And I hate that for Elden Ring because everything else about it is pretty spectacular. Regardless, it's time to hear what you guys think in the comments. What do you all think about the Fire Giant or really any of the late game bosses? I'd love to hear what you think down in the comments below, even if it's just a simple get good. With that being said, don't forget to like and subscribe, or you're never gonna beat Elden Ring, guys, I'm telling you right now.